Hello and welcome! Today, we're jumping headfirst into a whirlwind tour of the big, often confusing ideas that shape our world. We're going to break down all those political labels you hear every single day so you can finally get a handle on what they really mean.
I mean, seriously, you hear these words thrown around constantly, right? Sometimes as compliments, a lot of times as insults. But what is the actual difference between, say, conservatism and liberalism, or socialism and communism? Well, let's clear it all up.
To get our bearings, we've got to start with the basics. And that means looking at the classic political spectrum that really forms the foundation for so many of these other ideas.
Okay, so on one side you've got conservatism. This ideology tends to value things like tradition, family, religion, a strong military, and, of course, private property rights. A good modern example would be the U.S. Republican Party. Then on the other side, you have liberalism, which puts a major focus on individual rights, equality, and a clear separation of powers. But, and this is super important, these labels can change over time. Get this, Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, was actually considered a liberal in his day because he fought to end slavery. Back then, the Democrats were the conservatives on that issue. It just goes to show you how much things can shift.
So if those are the two poles, where do most people actually fit? Well, for a lot of folks, it's somewhere right in the middle. That's centrism. It's basically the approach of looking at both sides, taking what you think are the best ideas from each, and not getting locked into one single ideology.
All right, moving beyond that classic left-right divide, you'll find that a ton of these ideologies are really about one thing: money. Yep, who controls it, who gets to make it, and who benefits from it all.
And that brings us to the big one, capitalism, which is pretty much the world's dominant economic system. It's built on a few really core ideas. First, you can own your own stuff, private property. Second, you can buy and sell things in a free market. Third, you can compete with other people to make new and better products. It also really relies on a separation of powers, to keep the government from getting too involved, and on cooperation between all the different players in that market.
Now this is where it can get a little tricky, so pay attention. Capitalism is not the same thing as corporatism. That's a system where the government, businesses, and labor unions all work together to make the big economic decisions, like they do in places like Sweden. And it is definitely not a corporatocracy. That's a scenario where massive corporations have so much power they can basically control the government, a future that some people really worry about.
So what about the other side of the economic coin? Well, to get our heads around socialism, this quote is just the perfect way to think about it. It's not one single rigid thing. It's more like a giant umbrella that covers a whole bunch of different ideas.
And when you look under that umbrella, you find a whole range of ideologies. Now, in theory, socialism is all about the state owning key industries and the power being in the hands of the workers. But in practice, some forms of socialism, like those we've seen in the USSR, North Korea, and Venezuela, have often led to authoritarian rule and pretty severe economic hardship.
The absolute key thing to understand about communism is the massive gap between the idea and the reality. The idea sounds utopian, right? Everybody owns everything collectively. But the reality, historically, has almost always been that the state ends up controlling everything, usually with a powerful dictator at the top. Even today, the Chinese Communist Party has a more mixed system, but you still can't own land outright. You can only lease it from the government.
This whole conversation naturally leads us to another gigantic question. What is the actual role of government? How much power should it have? And on the flip side, how much freedom should individuals get to keep?
On one extreme end of that spectrum, you've got libertarianism. This is all about maximizing individual liberty. The goal is a tiny, minimal government with most of the real power resting in the hands of the people. It's an idea that sounds really appealing on paper, but it's proven to be very, very hard to actually put into practice.
Now, if you take that idea and push it to its absolute limit, you get anarchism, a complete and total lack of government. Individuals have total freedom to do whatever they want, but only if they have the power to protect that freedom. And while no country has ever been fully anarchist, there have been some fascinating real-world examples of places with no effective government, like the famous Kowloon walled city in Hong Kong.
Okay, so we've looked at the argument for as little government as possible. Now let's flip the script completely and look at the other extreme, ideologies where the state has all the power.
And that brings us to authoritarianism. Here, all the power is concentrated in the hands of a single leader or a very small group. Individual rights, they take a distant back seat to the needs of the state. And it's worth remembering, this was actually the most common form of government for most of human history, with more recent examples like Stalin's Soviet Union or Mao's China. Fascism is a very specific and very intense type of authoritarianism. It is extremely nationalistic, it's militaristic, and it's always led by a single dictator who violently crushes anyone who gets in their way. The core idea, which we saw in Mussolini's Italy, is that the individual is nothing and the state is absolutely everything.
And that, of course, leads us directly to Nazism. You can think of it as a form of fascism, but with a truly horrifying twist, a pseudo-scientific obsession with racial purity and the belief in a so-called master race.
Okay, deep breath. We've just covered the huge historical ideologies that define entire systems of government and economics. So now let's switch gears and do a rapid-fire round of some of the more focused ideas that are really shaping our world today. So many of today's debates are shaped by ideas like these. Feminism, at its heart, is the drive for social, political, and economic equality between the sexes. Environmentalism argues that protecting our planet has to be our #1 priority. Then there's progressivism, which, just like the name says, pushes for social progress and reform, often standing in direct opposition to conservative traditions. Populism is a bit different. It's more of a political style where leaders try to appeal directly to the people against some kind of elite. And finally, one of the newer ideas on the block is transhumanism, which is all about using technology to radically enhance human abilities, maybe even to overcome death itself.
And there are still more. Imperialism is that historical drive to build an empire by conquering other lands. Think of the British Empire. The opposite of that is separatism, where a group inside a country wants to break away and form their own nation, like the independence movement in Scotland. Communitarianism tries to get past the whole left-right thing by arguing we should just focus on what's best for the community as a whole. And finally, a theocracy is a system where the government is ruled by religious leaders, with the Islamic Republic of Iran being a prime modern example.
And there you have it. That was a tour of 24 different ideologies. I know, it's a lot to take in at once. But honestly, just understanding what these terms mean is the first and most important step to making sense of the political world all around us.
So, after that massive whirlwind tour, it really makes you wonder, what's next? I mean, these are the ideas that have built and destroyed empires, that have sparked revolutions, and they are absolutely still shaping our world every single day. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. As all these old ideas get challenged and brand new ones start to emerge, which of these ideologies, or maybe one we haven't even heard of yet, is going to be the one that defines our future? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us.